I'm Audra Cunningham. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer for T. Smith & Company. I have been in this industry for 15 years after a wonderful, long, 23-year telecom career. It was amazing, and people were like, okay, how did you end up here? When AT&T announced they were going to acquire Bell South, I was in my 40s and decided I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. And believe it or not, I had met John Dewberry back in 1993 when I first moved to Atlanta and didn't know anyone. And he planted the seed of commercial real estate, which is how I knew what it was. And then I decided I wanted to be a tenant rep broker. So I've started my career working with Shar Fortune. I wasn't really working with her, but I was at Grubb & Ellis. She was the first female leader that I saw in this industry, and it was a long time before I saw another one. And so she was very inspirational in my career and my aspirations on what I did in commercial real estate. So I am, as you can imagine, thrilled, honored, and humbled to be at this table with these very tenured women. And I am going to start. As I said, we're going to have fun. All right, and Connie Engel, I first met her. We're going to talk about that a little later, but I first met her with my board director service and an organization called On Board. She's a partner with Childress Klein Properties. And we have Kay Younglove, who is now the founder and principal of Younglove Real Estate. And, of course, our Shar Fortune, who is the former principal and global director of talent development at Avison & Young. She's actually retired, and I'm going to do a panel tomorrow with her retired husband. So they're trying to be retired, but we keep reeling them back in. Connie, do me a favor and just tell us how it all started and how you got here today.
As long as I don't have to tell you when it all started.
Well, we all know it's 30
okay,
plus.
It's a while back.
You're not wearing it. So
no, that's not real. Thanks. I went to school at the University of Iowa, really grew up and was raised in the Midwest, and went to work out of college for IBM. And IBM provided me really the first MBA I ever got, which was through them, the best training, best everything. They just spent lots of time with you. So towards the end of that period, I did not want to move around anymore, and I thought, I really always wanted to build stuff. And so I talked with a friend of mine that I had known at IBM, and I said, he was working at that time for Trammell Crow Company, and he had left IBM, gotten his MBA, then went to work for Trammell Crow, and I said, I really want to work for Trammell Crow. And, but I want to go south. I was in Minnesota. I kept going further north, and I wanted to come further south. And so I interviewed in Atlanta, San Diego, and Phoenix. Great places, right? But interestingly, the only offer I got was in Atlanta. So I took it. At that time, Trammell Crow was a button-up, wear your white shirt, get your MBA from Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, Yale. That was kind of it. So I was a little bit of a unique individual at that time. So that was a while back. And at that time, so it was Trammell Crow, stayed there, became Childress Klein 2 years later, and I've been with the same company for 37 years. So I know. So if you asked me, was that what was going to happen, I would have said, no, nobody does that. Who does that? But anyway, so that's kind of my history. And do you need more than that?
That's it? Come on now. Okay, so what role did you start in?
So I started out leasing, which was what I wanted to do. With Crow, the way that it worked is you went into leasing to learn what the client wanted. And, what was the design need to look like? What did the, architecture, how about negotiating the lease, all that kind of stuff. And so that was where I started in 37 years ago, and that's what I did the whole time. Now, the great thing about what I did at Childress Klein, which then became Childress Klein, is nobody bothered. And Monica and I worked together for about 4 years, and nobody bothered us. We just did our job. And that was really the best thing about it, to be honest with you. I left IBM because I had children. I did not want to not be able to go to the soccer games or the, whatever. I wanted to not have anybody looking over my shoulder. And so they never did. They kind of figured out quickly what would work for me, and it worked, and it did, and it worked out really well. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Wow, 37 years, you
Yeah,
told it.
I know.
Okay.
Yes, I grew up in a small town in southern middle Tennessee. And on acreage, my dad and my uncle had a real estate business. It was in a rural setting, you did everything. They had an auction and real estate business. And we had a farm it was really more of a ranch. A lot of land, a lot of cattle. We had gardens, we had horses, we had lots of chores. So I really do think that lifestyle, my parents were both raised on farms, so there's this attitude of you contribute to the success of your group, your family, and I've always had that in me. It was ingrained very early on. So that's my background. I guess high school, I helped my dad a lot with his sales. We had estate auctions a lot, and I kept the books and things like that. So I had some exposure, but it's a very different thing in a rural environment in Tennessee. I went to Tennessee Tech University and then met a guy, who is my husband now of all these years. We met in college. He was transferred to Atlanta, and that's how I made my way to Atlanta. Back in the days when you got married first and then you moved in together. So I followed my man to Atlanta.
What a concept.
Yeah, what a concept. I followed my man to Atlanta, and he came down before me and had gotten an apartment. And I think it's important for the young people in the room, I didn't know a soul. And Connie, you were the same way. I didn't know a soul in this city except for my husband. And I was finishing up my classes at Georgia State University for my degree, and I was looking for a job. And I got a job at the apartment complex as a leasing agent. And it was a great job for while you were in school, because on rainy weekends, you could do all your homework for school. But it also gave us a free apartment, which was checkbox to our biggest living expense, because my husband was a teacher and a coach. So that's kind of how I found my way. Later, a company purchased the apartment complex, and back during the days of limited partnership syndications, like back in the 80s, before 86, there was a lot of that going on, and they started buying little office properties and gave me the opportunity. I think I had leased 5 apartments one, sweltering hot August weekend, and they thought I could lease. So they gave me an opportunity to lease office space. And I really did feel like I'd found my niche. So that's how I got into it.
Excellent. It's funny, when I moved here, I knew one person, and that was my girlfriend that had moved here the year before in 1993. So I think that's a testament of what you can accomplish if you just plant yourself and then bloom.
And the friendly nature of Atlanta.
That's true.
I mean,
That is
really.
so true.
You come to Atlanta and people are wonderful.
You have to at some point tell who you were told that you needed to look up once you came here.
Oh, Shar and Kay. You need to go. It was the guy at Trammell Crow. He said, well, you got to go meet these two. I said, okay, I'll do it.
So I got this call out of the blue when I was at Portman, leasing Peachtree Center. Connie Engel.
Yeah.
In the 80s. It would have been in the 80s.
Right.
So I'm a little hillbilly from West Virginia, and my mother's sole mission in life was to educate her girls and get them the heck out of West Virginia. Seriously. My parents were World War II generation, and they met in the Navy in World War II. My mother was a Navy nurse, and my dad was in the Seabees. And so when they got out of the Navy, my dad was from West Virginia, and my mother drove across country from Colorado. Can you imagine this back in the 40s? She drove alone to West Virginia to marry my dad. She hated West Virginia. And so that was her whole mission, to get her girls out of there. So we both had college educations, and my sister is 2 years older than I, and she ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina, a Latin and German teacher. So when I got out of college, I drove to Raleigh, and that's how I got out of West Virginia. But she was dating a man who owned an apartment locator service. And that service was nothing more than a desk in the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel at Crabtree Valley Mall in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm on straight commission showing apartments, and I got to know the hotel staff because a lot of the day I'm twiddling my thumbs, right? And it turned out that the owner of Crabtree Valley Mall and the Sheraton needed a receptionist. And so they got me an interview with Davidson and Jones in Raleigh. And they were developers and contractors. And I got a job as a receptionist. So how did I get into this business? It was divine intervention, trust me. But Bob Pace was my boss at the time, and he had a daughter my age, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he knew that I was smart and I wanted to do something besides answer the phone. And so he's the one who gave me the opportunity to lease space. So I cut my teeth on a 30,000 square foot office building and a 75,000 square foot retail center. And it's in Raleigh that I met and married Will Fortune, my first husband, and he had 2 children. So to make a very long story short, he was in the carpet industry, and we moved to Atlanta because of his work in Calhoun. Well, I grew up in a Calhoun, and so I was not going to Calhoun. So we ended up in Marietta, and I got a job at North by Northwest, that little campus office environment up on Windy Hill Road. There were goats grazing next door to the complex when I got my first job. I kid you not. I got paid $10,000 a year to go cold calling. And that's how I got started in the business. And so the first 17 years of my career, I leased office space, and then I got into management. And I've done a lot of different things. That's where Kay and Connie and I are a little different. They stayed in leasing most all of their careers, but I eventually went into some leadership positions and just did different things. But it was a great career. I had no idea in Elkins, West Virginia, that commercial real estate was a thing. So when I say this was divine intervention, God had a plan for me that I never saw coming.
I love that. And another maybe unknown fact, when I was running around this city in 2008 of all times, talking about, I'm going to be a tenant rep broker, I'm going to be a tenant rep broker, and people were kind of laughing at me, not really kind of, they were. And I got a little feedback from a couple of meetings that I had that I was black and female and over 40, and that I should go back to corporate America because this was just not a business I could be successful in. I met this guy named Steve Dills, and he thought differently. So it comes full circle, that whole divine intervention. Steve immediately felt like there was some talent there, and all I needed to do was learn the technical aspect of real estate. And again, here I sit today. So Sharon, we're just intersecting
I know,
all over the place.
I know.
But there's always this common theme most times, except I just heard, Helen, is that your name? Yeah. I just heard Helen's dad is in the business. Most times, though, we have some kind of backstory to how we stumbled into the business. So I absolutely love that. Do me a favor and just talk about, over your 37-year career, Connie, some of the real big highlights of your career. And how did you, although you stayed in leasing, have you always done tenant rep or agency leasing, or?
Just Galleria.
Okay.
The only thing I ever did that whole time was Galleria. So I should have said that. Sorry. There are a lot of things I probably will. So thanks for prompting me.
Well, you are here to just
That's
keep
all right.
talking.
Thanks for prompting me. So we had, Trammell Crow had started building the office buildings up there at the Galleria, and then Childress Klein kind of kept it going, and we had 2.3 million square feet of space there. So it was plenty to, say grace over. And fortunately, Don Childress just said, "You go, girl." I mean, really. That was really about all that happened there. And so I kept leasing there. And so I never did tenant rep work except for one friend deal, but And it's been, it was kind of fun. I mean, I like the people side of the business. So the fact that I had a great product and I came out of that mindset, I want to work for the best of the best in the field that I'm in. And so I'd worked for IBM. I thought I want to work for the best. And the best at that time in terms of developers, I mean, arguably there were other folks, but was Trammell Crow Company. So that, and the fact that Don just kind of didn't care, I guess, and he just let me go. So for 30 plus years, I mean, I probably leased millions of square feet over and over again. I lost track. I mean, I have absolutely no idea, but I would guess over 30 years, I leased that place, I don't know. What do you think, Monica? 4 or 5 times? I don't know.
At least.
Yeah, well, right. But the neat thing about it was, I think what kept me there so long was that every day was really fun. I mean, people would walk in the office that were unannounced. I would be fascinated by their businesses. I would love to get to know them. And then over all of that time, I was there so long, I was doing 2 and 3 and 4 renewals for them. So I got to know everybody really well. And today, you know, some of those people are still very close friends of mine. And I'm doing something kind of different right now. And it's with one of those people that had said to me, hey, how about this? And so after 30 plus years doing the same thing, it's been really fun. It's like I think I'm entering my 3rd phase. You know, I did the IBM phase, I did the Childress Klein phase, and I'm getting ready to do another phase, Lord willing. I mean, I don't really know, but
Okay,
we'll
so
hope
it's
for the
still a
best.
secret, that's why.
Oh, no, it's not a secret. You
Okay.
just don't want me to get started on it.
I do. I think everybody wants to know what's next. Absolutely.
Well, all right then.
About 3 hours, honey, we're good.
Sit back. So, you know, maybe not, but in 2020, I'll address this to Helen. Helen, in 2020, Piedmont Office Realty Trust, it was COVID, right, came in at the end of 2019 and said, well, we want to buy all the buildings. And that was part of what I had done, was I had coordinated all the different owners that we had there and tried to keep them all happy, because that's a fairly unusual thing to be leasing for the same property for different owners. You want to make sure everybody's happy, right? So, so Piedmont came in and said, well, we're going to buy everything. We're going to basically assemble, you know, do a residential assemblage, but we're going to buy all the office buildings. So we kind of knew, oh, okay, well that means, because we've been managing everything as well. So we were managing and leasing it all. So they came in and they immediately said, we're going to do all the leasing, you can keep the management. Well, the only person that the leasing affected was me. I mean, seriously. Everything else was management. So I sat down with my partners and I said, well, I don't want to retire. How about you guys? And they said, no, we don't want to retire either. And I said, well, okay, I know all these people over all these years. Why don't I just start calling people, and I'll see if, since I don't represent the landlord anymore, I'll see if I can represent them. So I started calling people. I had all the information I needed. I had all the expiration dates. I knew who was coming up and who wasn't. So I started calling everybody, and about the 3rd or 4th day, I was calling people. Hard to believe I was back to cold calling on the phone. But I called an old friend of mine who actually was an architect out of California. And I said, well, Dave, I'm not going to be leasing the gallery anymore. He was one of those people that I had renewed many times. I'm not going to be doing that anymore, but I can represent you. And he said, well, done. Done. You do that. I'm going wherever you go. And I said, well, I'm not actually going anywhere, but I can represent you. And he said, okay, well, can I talk to you tonight? Because he was in California. He said, I want to chat with you tonight. I said, sure. So the phone rings that night, and he tells me about the fact that he was having to put his mother into an assisted living, senior living. And in California, he could not find anything that he wanted or liked. And so he had been kind of thinking from an architectural perspective, what would be the right solution here? Because it wasn't suiting his mom. And he said, would you be my development partner here? And I said, yes. I told you all way back at the beginning that what I really wanted to do was to build stuff, right? So I said, yes, I'll do it in a heartbeat. We did not have a senior living development or a division within Childress Klein. And so we've really been working on that ever since now for really almost 3 years. And a lot of zoning issues. I'm learning all these things that I didn't know before. And so we're working our way through zoning, working our way through site selections, working our way through getting the financing. So it really is a new start for me, but it's very fun. I have had so much fun. These guys are so tired of hearing this story. But that is indeed what I'm doing now. So it's never over. You can always do something else. And that's a part of I think my closing comment to you all would be, if you want to keep doing something, go do it. So.
That is exciting. Congratulations.
Well, not yet.
Well,
Wait till I break ground and then we'll all cheer.
You're learning things.
I am.
It's the exploratory phase, and something's going to happen with it. So, and you've touched on what we're going to talk about in a little bit, which is relationships and the importance of relationships. And you stumbled right into it, but I want to hear from Kay and Shar some of the highlights over your career and any changes that you made. What drove you to those changes? Because especially for the mid-level and young people in this room, to understand that you don't have to just do what you're doing for 30 years, or you can.
Right.
It's your choice, but you have all these transferable skills.
Sure. For the younger people in the room, I think back, this giving a little thought to this today has been a little bit of a walk down memory lane. So I was thinking back about just even the first job I got leasing apartments, and I knew no one here, and I was looking for a job, and I just put out the word that I was looking for a job. It's just important to remember that you're interviewing wherever you go. Because when I walked in and met the person who ran that office for the first time and presented myself and talked to them about an apartment and all, somewhere in that, she decided I would be a good person to work there. And I didn't know I was interviewing, but apparently, I was. So I just think that's something to always remember. As far as interesting highlights, that was the original question, highlights of the career. My first 8 years were with Metro Atlanta Properties. I was in my 20s. I rose quickly. I didn't really have a mentor. I had two guys, Bob Fishback and Dark Doherty, who gave me a lot of opportunity. Somehow they trusted me, and I guess they saw my work ethic. And I sort of learned this business. It was really kind of getting dunked in the deep end of the pool. I mean, within a short period of a few months, they continued to do new acquisitions. So I think within about 9 months, I had 6 properties that I was responsible for leasing and managing and hiring people and everything, and I was still in my 20s. So it was baptism by fire, really, and learning on the they And it really, I hear a lot of people say, well, did you have mentors? Well, they mentored me because and like Connie was saying, they trusted you to do the job, and they kind of left you alone, to do the job. So you had to be resourceful and figure things out. I will tell you a little anecdote. The first time I was hired to go to this office project, keeping in mind I've only ever leased apartments. Well, I had not really read a complete lease. So I go and they go, well, there's a desk and there's a filing cabinet and there's files with leases, and they need to have their escalation letters sent out. Well, I knew as much about an escalation as like an escalator goes up and down in the mall. That's what I knew, an escalator, truthfully. So, I was resourceful enough to pull out the lease, read it, look at all the past correspondence where they had been billed for their escalations, and it was a CPI index. So I called the Bureau of Labor Statistics and pretended to be a tenant and pretended that I had received a letter and said, I just want to make sure this is being billed correctly. And they said, yes, ma'am, that's how you do it. So I sat down, wrote all the letters, and sent them out, and didn't admit to the people who hired me until years later that I had no idea how to do what they asked me to do. So I think these days, you all, with having the internet at your fingertips, you have so many more resources. So that's one of the really positive things. After that experience, I really do think, and I think this is a question later, but I may be getting to it a little quickly. The question was, how has associations helped us in our careers? Shar and I were both young, starting out together, but as you can imagine, there weren't a lot of women anywhere in the industry. It was a male industry. And we grew up during a time when most of the women in business, quite candidly, were in support roles. And you didn't call them an administrative assistant, they were somebody's secretary, you know, and so how do you get to the table where your opinion is valued and sought beyond just a support role? So that was probably the biggest challenge of our day, would you say?
Amen.
I'm trying to give you a little context because things have changed so dramatically from when we were coming up. Yeah, thankfully. Some things not so much, but thankfully some things are changing. So anyway, out of the blue, I was called by a woman who said, you know, there's this group that's been started in DC. We think it'd be a good idea for women to get together in our industry. And we sat on bar stools somewhere, Houlihan's, I think, and made a list of all the women we knew in the business, which was like 30. There were no female attorneys then. There were no female asset managers. It was mostly property managers, a few leasing agents. And we came together, and I think Shar was at that initial meeting, and I was at, and we formed CRE. And that's been 41 years ago now. But we formed CRE, and Shar and I both were on the initial board. And I do know that later I got a call from a recruiter, and I was asked if I wanted to interview for a job working for John Portman. And it was to lease Peachtree Center because the Marriott Marquis 1 and 2 had just been built and they needed some leasing assistance. Well, I went to the interview, and it was with Sam Williams at the, actually at the Ritz-Carlton Dining Room in Buckhead. And I sat down for breakfast. It was breakfast. I sat down with him. He excused himself to go to the men's room. And I looked over and I saw he had this whole little dossier on me. And sitting on the top was about my CRE involvement. And I realized he wound up interviewing 20-something people, and I got the job. And I think I may have been the only woman. Later, when I interviewed for leasing One Atlantic Center, which we all call the IBM Tower back then, out of 25 people, I was the only woman. So there was something you need to do to set yourself apart. And just to have been a leader in an organization like CRE, I think was what really made the difference, candidly. So that was my next job, Peachtree Center. So it was 8 years at Metro Atlanta Properties, 5 years for the Portman Companies at Peachtree Center, after which Mr. Portman kind of overextended himself and the wheels came off. He was building the Marriott Marquis in New York, in Times Square, the one in Atlanta, the Marquis 1 and 2, the Merchandise Mart in Forum, and expanding the Apparel Mart, all at the same time.
Shocking that didn't work.
Yeah, it's shocking. I think he was trying to get it all in before he was, past retirement age. But so sometimes too, the very, Shar knows these ladies know I like a good analogy. And Shar, they're both great golfers, far better than I am, but I enjoy a round of golf every now and then. And I call it playing from the rough. I mean, you watch golf on television and you see that even the professionals have errant shots and it goes in the rough. Well, how do you get out of the rough? And I think a lot of success in this business is figuring out how to get out of the rough. And so after that, that was the rough. Portman was losing everything, and 75 people were laid off one day, and I was one of them. And that meant a lot of my compatriots were out looking at the same jobs I was looking at. So I eventually wound up getting an interview with Prentice Properties, who developed One Atlantic Center and developed a lot of other properties. But my tenure at Prentice is one of the highlights of my career, I would say. And it is because I had eventually 26 floors of space to backfill for IBM. And I got to work on some really sizable deals. I did 301,000 square foot deal with the FDIC, multiple law firm deals with Arnold Golden Gregory and Holland and Knight that were in the 70 to 100,000 square foot range. And we were able to lease 26 floors back without breaking up a floor. And it was a sublease that had an 8.5-year term. Another thing I would tell you is surround yourself with creative, capable people on your team. Mark Rusci, which some of the guys, some people in the office, in the audience know, was just a really great attorney, and he had this idea for doing this Arnold Golden and Gregory deal that was not a sublease, but a make-whole and guarantee agreement, which was complicated, but it allowed us to give them a 10-year term. It was a very creative way to do a deal. That, I think, is what's kept me in leasing all of these years. And the other thing that's kept me in leasing, and then I'll hush so Shar can speak, is when Prentice decided to shut down in Atlanta, Jim Meyer, who a lot of you know, was packing up his office, and I still had a job because I still had leasing to do, but they were shutting down the development side. And I said to him as he was packing his office, "Do you have any words of wisdom for me?" And he said, "Yeah, don't ever get out of production, because as long as you're in production, you are contributing, and and there's a need for that." I also noticed over the years that it was a great equalizer. Because to me, if you're in production, if you're in leasing, you are really tasked with creating, maintaining, or improving the value of an asset. And the value of the asset is what's all important to those people who made that investment. So I've always felt you were on the front lines of creating value. And I always found that to be a great equalizer. If you make them money, they don't care if you're white or black or gender, whatever your gender is, whatever your race is. It really makes no difference if you're getting the job done. And again, too, I think it goes back to how I was ingrained. I always wanted to be a meaningful contributor to the effort and to the program. So,
Yeah, you have to have something that grounds you and keeps you moving forward because of the real estate ebbs and flows and how we go through all these different cycles. So that's a lot of really good advice.
yeah, getting out of the rough.
Shar.
So what was the question?
I had to ask it to be repeated, too.
Lost track. Highlights of your career, and if you had any changes, any moves that you made that were essential to what you're doing today.
Well, there have been seminal moments throughout my career, but a funny story. This is back in the North by Northwest days, and I'm brand new in the business. I'm in my early 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. And we had land at North by Northwest for development. And IBM had their regional headquarters here at the time. And they had a big RFP out for some kind of training facility. And we were proposing a site for that facility. And my job in this presentation was to talk about North by Northwest. Well, you would think, well, no problem. Well, I don't know if you remember back in the day, we had big scaled models of these big developments, right?
Portman was.
And so North by Northwest had this model room, and when the brokers would come in, I would take them into the model room and walk them around and show them and talk to them about North by Northwest. And so I had a great prop. Well, we're going on site to IBM's offices to make this pitch. I am so nervous that morning because I had no idea what to say. And do you think anybody helped me? No. Oh, you got this. Well, no, I don't. I was so nervous that my boss offered to take me out for a Bloody Mary before the presentation. Seriously. Seriously. So you're going, oh, you did fine, Sharp. Yeah, no. I get in there at IBM's, and I'm so intimidated. I'm the only woman in the room of, 20 men. They had all these IBM executives and North by Northwest, and I'm a young woman. And I am so nervous, you can hear my voice shaking as I speak. And I had no idea what I was saying. And it was, I can't remember what I was wearing all of these years ago. That's how mortifying that experience was. But I got to tell you, I walked out of that meeting and I said, never again. And that's when I learned how to public speak. And I will tell you that communication skills are one of the best skills you can learn in this business. If you cannot speak in a boardroom, if you cannot communicate an idea or a strategy with clarity, it's a problem. So I went about the business of studying how to make a good presentation and how to be a better salesperson. Because, look, I was a second born. I got a big personality. No problem. Yeah, well, there was a problem. So anyway, that was a big moment. But anyway, fast forward into the 90s, and a guy named Bruce Fernald, who is now with the Portman organization, the whatever iteration of Portman it is, went to work for a company called Ares. It was a division of Mutual in New York, Money, which has long been defunct. But this is, Mutual in New York was taking back so much commercial real estate so fast after one of the recessions that they couldn't even manage the keys to these developments. So they created this management company called Ares, A-R-E-S, to do that. And Bruce hired me, gave me a chance. He took a flyer. It was my first management job. He hired me to be the asset manager and the leasing director for 5 million square feet of space in Atlanta that Ares was taking back. Well, this is another one of those moments when I had no idea how to write a business plan. Computers had just been introduced to the workplace. I was trying to figure out how to use a computer. We were still taking phone messages with the little pink message slips, right? So I didn't know how to write a business plan. I had 80 transactions that I walked into that brokers were mad about because nothing was happening. That's where I learned how to manage multiple competing priorities. It's where I learned how to manage and lead people. It's where I learned how to build teams and work with teams and get good architects and good contractors and good leasing people. And it was a safe environment for me to be able to do that. But if it weren't for Bruce, and if you know him, say hello to him for me. I rarely see him. But that man gave me a completely different career trajectory because he took a chance on me. And the reason he took a chance on me is because I had built some reputation capital. We're going to talk in a minute about brand management and all of that. It wasn't called brand management back then. It was your reputation. And your reputation is all you have in this industry. You can take you years to build it and about 15 minutes to destroy it. So we knew as women, this is back in the day when the stats were this, 95% white men in commercial real estate and 5% minorities. And of the 5%, women were the majority of the minority. That's what it was. So this is what we were facing. So when you went into a meeting, you didn't have the internet where you could Google stuff. You just kind of had to go figure it out. But Bruce gave me that chance to do that, and I was able to learn a lot of those skills in a safe environment. And so from there, because I had built a good reputation, I was a hard worker, I got things done, I learned how to think in outcomes. I learned how to think strategically. And those weren't skills that came naturally to me. But I cannot tell you how much they helped me in the following years of my career. So I went on to get into management with Trammell Crow and Cushman & Wakefield and a lot of other companies. And then finally at Avison Young, I did something completely different, which we can talk about later. But reputation capital, it's all you got.
Wow.
Into that.
Yes. I'm going to sum up what you just heard. So for you, those of you that are taking notes, be resourceful. There are going to be plenty of times when you are asked to do something and the answer is not, well, how? The answer is to go, especially in today's world, because these ladies were doing this back when there were no computers and you couldn't just type in something. There was no Chat GPT. Wow. And
I love ChatGPT.
we all do. We all do. And I will tell you, I won't go through my telecom career, but again, a lot of what Shar just mentioned, you have to show up, okay? And we're not going to get into a whole work from home conversation today. I'm just going to tell you, I wouldn't be sitting here today. None of these ladies would be sitting here today if we decided to work from home every day, if that had been, even been an option. So for the young people in the room, even though you were given that option, think about it. I'm going to quote somebody in this room that we all know, Dallas. Build relationships before you need them. I think they just all gave testimonials about relationships and how that got them into a place they never thought that they would be or into a room that they thought that they would never get into. So I hope everybody takes those 3 big takeaways today. Before we go on break, I do want to touch on just a little bit around mentoring, because that goes into relationships. And if you could weave the two together, how, if you were mentored, if you weren't mentored, who you're mentoring and how they became your mentee, because that is an important part of the business. I got into the business when I was a little more experienced, and I think it was hard for people to think about mentoring me. It was like, that was weird to them. So hopefully you guys don't do that to anybody else, because we all need a mentor no matter how old we are. So please share a little.
Listen, I'll be honest, I did not really have much of a mentor. I mean, I told you a little bit about Don, and he basically just threw me into the pool and said, bye-bye, good luck. And so
It was not a
we
thing.
mentored each other, I
We
think.
did.
more
We
than
mentored each other. It was not a
Yeah.
thing when we came up.
fine.
There were, the men, they just did their thing. Privilege is invisible to those who have it.
Yes, I love it.
And they didn't realize that they were the clique,
Yeah.
and we were not. We weren't in the clique, and they had no clue. So it didn't even occur to them to try to help us. They were helping each other. So we had to figure it out, and that's why there's CRE. That's why we started CRE. That's why we've been fast friends for 40 years, because we help each other.
We are each other's board of directors,
Right.
internal board of directors.
Right.
We really are. I mean, I'm sitting here with my 2 best friends. I mean, how lucky is that? So do that.
And really, if not for this business, I mean,
Yeah.
this business
Oh,
gave
yeah.
us that gift
Yeah.
of friendship.
You also did something, though. You answered the phone. When Connie called, you answered the phone.
Oh, totally.
And
Oh, totally.
So,
Took the meeting.
yeah, and you took the meeting. And so, I mean, I know personally, I get a lot of calls from women and people of color. And that's the one thing you've got to do is you've got to answer the phone. I think, Dallas, you have like a whole half a day every week or something where he talks to people. I don't know how he does it, but I try to do the best I can. It doesn't hurt to answer the phone. They don't all have to be in in-person meetings, but these are examples of what can happen when you do, because some people just need a little bit of guidance, not necessarily the whole mentorship program. Do you mentor people now?
Well, I've participated in the board's mentoring program, and I've gone through that with a couple of mentees as their mentor and created friendships there. So that's been wonderful. But I would say more than anything, it's what you described. I cannot even tell you the number of calls I've had over the years, largely from men in our industry who go, would you mind having lunch with my daughter? Would you mind having lunch with my niece? Would you mind? It's typically a woman. Sometimes it's a young man they want me to meet with. But I take the time. It's rare that anybody's ever asked me to do that I haven't made time for it. And I can't even tell you how many of those lunches I've had. But it's gratifying to me that maybe there's something about my experience that would help them in some small way. And they're grateful for the time, and we follow up. And have friendships from those experiences too, where I check back in over time. So I'd say it's largely informal mentoring that I would say I've done.
I would tell you that I am very purposeful about it. Not even in retirement, I still have a handful of mostly women that I mentor. But 15 years ago, when I got into a position of leadership and authority where I could do that, I was very purposeful about helping early career professionals. So I've started groups of young women, and I would regularly meet with them. What I did at Avison Young, I mean, I touched hundreds of lives, teaching them how to sell and how to prospect and do that. But I just had a heart for it because it was so hard for me getting started. And I thought, if I can ever turn around and give somebody a hand who needs it, that I would do that, because nobody gave me a hand.
Well, you really turned mentoring into this phase of your career. This last phase of your career was all about mentoring young people and training young people in our industry, so it's wonderful.
And so my addition to that is that, so create your own group.
Right.
I mean, if you don't have a group, make one. It's not up to somebody else to come to you to invite you into their group. Make your own group. And you always need somebody that's carrying that ball. I mean, you always do. We still do. And that there are a lot of people that I'll pick up the phone and call just to say hi. And thank you so much. Great to hear from you. But they just never pick up the phone and call you back. Don't worry about that. That's not what relationships are all about. Relationships are all about staying in touch. And if you're the one that's blessed with that desire, take advantage of it. Don't just suddenly say, well, I'm tired. I'm not going after anybody anymore. So anyway.
I would add, and this is for everyone, but just be open to constructive feedback. Not everybody is meant for production. It is not as glamorous and easy as it looks.
It is not easy.
And there are cycles to it, and not everybody's prepared for that. I know I've had to have some tough conversations with folks. I mean, if you showed up to the meeting with me late, what am I doing with that? I mean, you called me and asked me to meet with you to talk about career.
That drives me crazy.
I mean, so it's just little things that I watch. Are you negative while we're talking? Well, I'm at this job now, and everybody's terrible, and and I know no one in this room is like this. But when you start forming your circles, and when you see that, those are the things that I look at, especially when it comes to production. But the good news is there's so many other aspects to commercial real estate that not everybody has to be a producer, and you can still make a meaningful contribution. So with that said, I think this is a good time to break, Robin. Look at me. I am on time. I am the moderator. So I think we're taking a 10-minute break. Hope you enjoyed the break. We're going to start talking about some things that are really going to be helpful for you as you are building or growing your career, especially in a time when the market is what it is, which I don't think it's bad. I mean, not raining deals, but there are definitely deals to be done. I tell people, if you've learned how to do real estate the right way, you should be fine during a market like this. If you haven't, yeah, you might be struggling. So let's start with brand. Your brand is so important to you. And unfortunately, sorry, not sorry, but you cannot separate your personal and your professional brand. You can try it if you want to, but I know people on social media that do try to have their little personal crazy Instagram and then their business Instagram. If you're really serious about this business, I would strongly recommend you don't. That's just my 2 cents. But it is super important, and it's so much easier for you guys now with social media. So let's chat about your thoughts on how you built your brand the hard way without social media, and then maybe your thoughts on how folks can use social media to make it a little easier, and some of the right ways to do it, especially for those of you that have hired people and mentored people and trained people. What is the advice that you give them? Connie, do you want to start?
Do you want to start with Shar, since she was the
She's going to be she's got a whole different, I'm going to save Shar for last. She's got some good stuff, I know. Not that you guys don't.
No.
You know what I
She does
mean.
have good stuff. Her stories are the best.
Yes.
So I think that, speaking of Shar, what she said earlier about your reputation, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, is that the wrong thing on a social media post, I mean, you can't even take it down because it's too late. It is too late. So Monica and I always talked about this, and she helped kind of train me on some of the good things that you could do with all of it. But as it relates to the brand, it is what you said. I would say the fact that I was associated with the Galleria for all those years, I mean, that was my brand, right? I mean, I had a great property. Everybody knew where the Galleria was. Every taxi driver knew, you know, if you got in a taxi at the airport and you said, take me to the Galleria, they knew right where to go. So that was a lucky thing. But again, I kind of knew that when I was selling IBM stuff. I knew, again, you got to have a great product to sell. But I would say that probably, and it just came to me, and I can't believe it took me this long, the best brand thing I ever did was a bobblehead. Allison's like, she's like shaking the bobblehead. Yep. So in 2004, we were trying to figure out something that we could do to send a message out to all of the brokers. And so we were thinking, at that time, that was when the Performing Arts Center had just opened, and I'm thinking opera tickets and opera glasses and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And a lady friend of mine who owned one of those businesses that has the magazines, and you sit and you run through it, and it's got, you know, koozies and, you know, water bottles with your name on it. And we're kind of running through it, and all of a sudden we get to this page and there's a bobblehead there. And I said, wait just a minute. Do you mean I can actually get a bobblehead? And she said yes. Now the only negative was I had to buy 500 bobbleheads. And so I thought, well, that's probably a few more than what I need. But we went ahead. My husband took the picture of me. It was really kind of a fun thing. I'm sure all the pictures, you had to, you know, a picture from every angle, and you shipped the pictures off. And at that time, it was right when, I guess, cell phones had come out too. So I've got a briefcase in one hand and a cell phone in the other, my name and my phone number on the bobblehead. And I sent one out to every broker, every commercial real estate broker in town. And
I still have one.
do you? Okay, good. All right, you better, and you do too, Chris. All right. Thank you, Dale. So anyway, so that was almost 20 years ago now that I had that, and it was by far the best thing I ever did, and it was a take a chance, you know, see whether or not that stuck with people. And who's the CBRE guy that? He used to be at CBRE. Hunsaker. Hunsaker said to me, that was the best thing. He came up to me and he goes, that was a 10. That was a 10. And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? But anyway, that was about the best. But that was my brand, and that lasted really for a long time.
Clearly, it's still
Yeah,
existing.
yeah. I can't believe I hadn't thought about that till just now, but anyway.
You know what, Kay, before you go, I'm going to share, because that just brought something to my mind. Sometimes you have a brand and you have to kind of alter your brand a little bit. So because I'd been in telecom for so long, I was known as Miss Bell South. Honey, if your call waiting wasn't working, everybody called Audra. They didn't call the customer service line. If their phone went out because of a storm, they were all calling me. So when I got into commercial real estate, I was known as Miss Bell South. That's literally what they were calling me. So what I found after I transitioned and I would go to meet people, hey, you know, I'm a tenant rep broker. They're like, yeah, that's nice. And then they'd go do a deal with somebody else. And I'm like, didn't I just meet with you and tell you what I did 2 months ago? What is wrong with you people? And I finally figured out that they weren't connecting what that even meant. So then I had to go back and meet everybody all over again. And you know what I did? I made up a deal because I really hadn't been in that long and done anything. But I was like, yeah, you know, I worked with this client, and I started explaining to them the experience that I had with the client and the great thing that I did with the client. And all of a sudden, this light bulb clicked on what a tenant rep broker was and what Audra was now doing. And then I would follow up every 3 or 4 months and just share a deal that I did, so that when they had a real estate opportunity, hopefully I would stay top of mind. So branding is important, but then sometimes you have to transition your brand as you transition into another space. Go ahead, Kay, tell me about your branding experiences.
I would say, since I told you I spent my career in production, I would tell you that the brand kind of needs to surround production, you know, and surround numbers. So what I've found is that I kept finding myself with big blocks of empty space to lease. Whether I was at Portman or whether I was at One Atlantic Center and IBM had vacated the lower half of the building and that had to be filled back up. So I think after a while, I put in my resume that, you know, I was known for refilling half-empty buildings. And that idea seemed to catch. And I really think when Colonial hired me for 3 Ravinia, and the lower half of that building had been vacated, it was 49% leased. The fact that I had filled up the half-empty One Atlantic Center gave me the entree to fill up the half-empty 3 Ravinia Drive. So in my case, it was really just building off of what I hoped I had become known for and could be, you know, it was not so much branding as just making sure you say in words what it is you're doing.
But that
You were just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that really is a brand, though. I
Yeah.
mean, that's your brand. And the ironic thing, and I can't wait to hear from Shar, but the ironic thing is I haven't heard anybody say they hired a brand expert. And I'm not trying to put the brand experts out of business, because I do think that there's a place for them, but your brand expert is only as good as the information that you tell them and what you share with them. So
And the other thing, back during our day, and I think this still holds true today, and there's so many more avenues for this. I remember getting, you know, asked to write an area profile in the Dory's office guide, or being.
Explain what Dory's is.
Yeah, well, it was before CoStar and all the other things that are out there. It was a book that you got that had all the listings of office buildings that you had to look up. But every
y'all got it so easy these days.
every quarter it came out, and there was a profile of every submarket. So I was asked to write those, and I'd gladly do it because you're putting yourself out as an expert in that area of town. So there's all kinds of opportunities to do that. These days, you don't have to have somebody ask you. You can just go on your LinkedIn page and position yourself as an expert. And I think it goes back to, it has to be authentic. You can't just pull a brand out of the air because it's something you would like to aspire to. There has to be something about it that's true, and is true specifically of you. So this is not part of the conversation that you asked, but I mean, I think it's finding what you're good at And if you're early in your career, there's so many strength finders tests, and you inherently know where your passion is and what you enjoy doing. And if you build your brand off what you're good at and what you do well, then it's going to ring as authentic.
I think LinkedIn is really important, and you don't have to pay someone to figure out how to build. LinkedIn will teach you if you just go on LinkedIn and search. But it's such an easy way to tell the story about yourself. All right, Shar.
Well, the last 9 years at Avison Young, I traveled all over North America and Great Britain and ran a group called Emerging Leaders. And these were early career professionals that had less than 5 years of experience in the business. And so I'll give you some of the tips that I would give them. If you do not control your brand, your reputation, others will do it for you, and it will not go well. Ours is a very competitive business. You are the CEO of your business. You've got to behave that way. And so you have to evaluate everything that you're doing and not doing, what you're good at, what you're not good at. Do a gap analysis on yourself. Have a colleague or a good friend do it with you, because we see ourselves differently than other people do. So it's always good to have outside counsel, if you will. But you've got to control it, and so you have to think in terms of outcomes. What do I want to be known for in my industry? When people mention my name, what do I want them to say about me? That's the question you have to answer. And then you have to go about the business of creating that brand. The thing about our business is that it's not hard necessarily, it's just big, it's enormous. There's so much to do in commercial real estate. I mean, honestly, my mother went to her grave and never knew what I did for a living. Well, Mom, I'm in commercial real estate. Well, she's from Elkins, West Virginia. We didn't know what commercial real estate was. Even today, well, I'm in commercial real estate, but any idea what my house is worth? Did you not hear the words commercial? So the best way to describe to someone, family, prospects, mostly prospects, what you do for a living is to do what? Tell a story. Stories are your service demo. You can't walk into a prospect and fire up an iPhone and show them the functionality of what you do for a living. You cannot do it. What we do for a living is invisible, intangible, and yet to be delivered. It is a service. The only way that you can tell someone what you do for a living is by telling them a story about how you did it for someone else. So what I tell young people is, you've got to build a file of stories that meet different criteria depending on who you're with. And you've got to be able to pull them out of the air at a moment's notice. And stories, by the way, are not chapters. People's attention spans are between 4 and 9 seconds. That's it. So those first words out of your mouth better be very compelling or you've lost your audience. You can tell a story in 3 to 7 sentences. And if you can't, you're not doing it right. Wordsmithing matters. So So all of this is about how you build your brand. How do you dress? I got to tell you, in retirement, the thing that I mourn the most is my wardrobe. I loved my wardrobe. I did. I loved it. We loved to dress up. It was so fun. Y'all do this casual, I don't even think you know what business casual means anymore. And look, it's like Jeff Dill says to me, well, sure, it's just not that way anymore. Well, okay, I kind of get that. I know I lived in a different era, but I'm telling you, what you wear, how you take care of yourself is your brand. Why don't you want to make yourself memorable? If everybody else is business casual, don't be. Just don't. Be known for, do you remember Chris Aaronkeel is sitting right there. To me, he's got a brand. He is always styled out. He is known for that, in addition to his impeccable business skills. Sure. But the first thing I think of when I think of Chris is he's that handsome guy who always dresses to the nines. So let me tell you why that matters. Why do you think it matters?
Because you're interviewing wherever you go.
Like Kay said, you're interviewing wherever you go, but let me tell you why it matters. When you show up well-groomed, you are an object lesson to that person with whom you are meeting. And they look at you and they go, Dagmar, wow, you did your hair, you've got a nice suit on, nails are good, your shoes are shiny. What that tells people is about your discipline. It's a very subtle message about how you conduct your personal life. And if you show up disheveled, if you show up late, and I'm going to get to that, that's the brand you're sending. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care how I look. And so people are thinking, well, gosh, if you don't care how you look, you probably don't care about how you're going to take care of me, because you don't take care of you. And that's why it matters. So you can do business casual, you can do athleisure wear, whatever it is. Well, everybody does it. I don't want to be everybody. So anyway, I'll get off that pedestal. Now, being late. What is the old saying? If you're 5 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. In the NFL, Steve would always say, oh, if you're 15 minutes early, you're 30 minutes late. I had a boss one time. I showed up late to a meeting, and he called me out in front of everybody. And he said, Shar, let me tell you what happens when you're late. What you have just told this room is that you are more important than we are. Okay, I only need to hear that one time. So all of these little things add up to the big thing, which is your brand. And so I really encourage you to evaluate what you think your brand is now. To Kay's point, you have to be authentic. You've got to be you. You don't want to be somebody that you're not. But you could sure sharpen the edges and do a little polishing, and you can make a difference. So your LinkedIn profile, that's the thing. That's the business place online where you get to communicate who you are and what you do. Don't use your title. Well, I'm vice president, or I'm senior vice. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I know you care. I always cared. Oh, did I get that promotion? Nobody cares. It doesn't tell them what you do. So take that line on LinkedIn and describe what you do for your clients. So here's the line that you fill in. My clients hire me because, and then fill in that blank. And then that becomes your tagline on LinkedIn. That's what you do. My clients hire me because, and let me tell you, commercial real estate is at a very interesting time. I think we're going to talk about the differences between now and when we came up. But I got to tell you, it's hard right now, and it's going to get harder, especially with AI. Back in our day, information was what we traded on, and we gathered our own information. We did our own research. We made calls to landlords for vacancies and did stuff that CoStar does for you now. But that information is ubiquitous. People think they're smarter than you are because they can Google it. So I always tell young people that you really need to become a good business person. I don't care about your real estate knowledge. You're a commodity. I'm sorry, but you are. Allison and Chris and all of you that do lead, you're all great. You're all great. So how can you differentiate yourself? It's not with information, because everybody has the same information. I'm just telling you, CB and JLL and you name them, they all have great quarterly reports that nobody reads and nobody cares about. They don't. So how can you take that information and help your clients make good business decisions? So you've got to be a business person today, not a leasing agent, not a tenant rep. We tried and tried for years when we were coming up to become advisors and consultants. Remember, we went through all that, and everybody looked at us like, no, that's not what you are. But now, more than ever, I think that's where we live here in commercial real estate. You need to be an advisor. So anyway, those are just some things that I would encourage you to think about to be successful. Think in terms of outcomes. What do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? And then go about the business of fixing it.
Can I add to that? Because I think that's such great advice. But if you think, well, so I don't know how to do that, talk to somebody. I mean, ask somebody, hey, reflect, how am I doing, right? I mean, because you need some feedback. Not everybody can look in the mirror and go, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have worn that, or whatever. You really do need outside people to help out. So don't feel funny about asking for help.
I think that's a great idea, and be open for the feedback. I'm also going to add, whatever it is, I'm also going to add what goes along with that business attire is travel. What do you wear when you travel? And I might be the only one that is anal about this, but I have travel outfits, okay? Because I'm usually cold on the plane or on the train or whatever I'm on. I have gotten clients on trains and I've gotten clients on planes. I don't care if I'm on a 6 a.m. flight. I am going to look like the same as I would on a 10 a.m. flight. I have little Trailblazers, because again, I'm cold, long slacks, because I'm cold. And, depending if I'm going out to LA, I might have on some designer sneakers, but they're going to go very well with the outfit. But just pay attention to it, because I promise you, and I'm going to tell you this quick story. When I was at Bell South, one of the buildings I worked in was 675 West Peachtree Street. And my mother used to tell me, dress for the job you want, not the one you have. And I was what they called a 58. So in telecom, I was the lowest manager in the building. They went all the way up to whatever they went up to. I had just gotten there, and I'm on the elevator, and I'm in this beautiful suit, and the chairman, Dwayne Ackerman, gets on the elevator with somebody. And I don't meet a stranger, I never had, and I knew who he was, he didn't know who I was, so we started talking. We were going all the way up to 40-something floor, and we started talking. He gets off the elevator and was like, what's your name again? He thought he was supposed to know me. He thought he knew me, and maybe had forgotten his name because of the engagement that we had, and because I dressed like his subordinates. That right there told me, I don't care who's wearing what, I am gonna show up looking like I'm the boss. Because when the boss comes, they're gonna think I'm the boss. So hopefully, I knew that, Shar, you were gonna really share some exciting information for us. It's so important. You said it earlier, it takes a lifetime to build, and can be destroyed instantly. Doesn't mean you can't bounce back from a mistake, doesn't mean that you can't rebuild it, but who has time to do that? All right, let's talk about marketing and negotiation skills. You all have negotiated your entire life. It's not easy for everyone. It's not even easy doing the conversion from, I have a relationship. I know I struggled with it early on in my career. How do I monetize these relationships without seeming like I'm this little used car salesman? So if you can talk about your negotiation skills and how do you get to the point where you're negotiating? You all have a lot of relationships. How did you get them to choose you?
Yeah, Kay's got to take this one.
Yeah, I think in my career, it's interesting. Shar was talking about some things are just a God thing. And I do feel like along the way there were opportunities that came along that I just felt like I kind of had a unique thing for. And looking back, I'm thinking that in negotiation, part of it is, I think there's something about people who just have that as part of their nature. But I also think you can improve upon it, you can hone it, you can learn more. Years and years ago, I went to this seminar in New York called You Can Negotiate Anything. And the guy was Herb Cohen, I think is the author of this. You can still buy the book probably. It's worth getting. But it was really more about life, not just, it's about interpersonal skills and how so much of life is a negotiation in certain aspects, especially if you're married, right? But I think that was helpful. I think there's no substitute for having to do it and figure it out as you go. I have had some really crazy experiences where, back to getting in the rough, one experience where I had gotten the listing with IBM to lease the bottom half of the IBM Tower, One Atlantic Center. And the person who hired me was very pleased. His name was Trex Morris. We were doing all kinds of deals. We had a lot of deals teed up. We were working on this one, this really large one for 300,000 feet. Well, I was still with Prentice, and I was doing this under a contract between Prentice and IBM. And IBM had hired Prentice to do a lot of build-to-suits around the country. My company and IBM got really sideways on a deal in Texas, in Austin, Texas, that I had nothing to do with. And Trex comes to me and says, Kay, they're telling me that I cannot be under contract with somebody that we're about to go to arbitration or litigation with. So we were in the middle of a 300,000 square foot deal. And I'm getting fired. And he said, I'm going to hold off until they absolutely tell me I have to do this. Because he said, obviously, I don't want to do this. We're making great progress. So a few days passed, and he calls me up and said, I can't believe I'm even telling you this, but they've given me no alternative. I cannot be under contract with Prentice. And so I tripped around on my chin for about a day, thinking how unfair life is. And I thought for a minute, I thought, okay, they're not upset. They're not upset with me. We've signed deals, we've got all this going, they're very pleased with me. They're just upset with Prentice. So I called him back and I said, Trex, what if instead of being under contract with Prentice, you were just under contract with me? Let's say I form a little company called K. Young Love, Inc., and we just take the contract from Prentice and put it under my name. And I said, I'm telling you now, I don't plan on leaving my job at Prentice. They will get a portion of the commission rebated back to them because I have other leasing assignments I'm doing for Prentice. But it'll be a smaller split. And he said, that might just work. So the lesson to me in that is when you're totally in the rough and you're out of shots, think outside the box. I mean, think about what might work. It doesn't matter if they turn you down and say no, because what have you got to lose? So that's something, and I've seen that. I've seen deals almost fall apart when some outlandish resolution pulled it all back together again. And I could give you numerous examples of that.
Being creative and resourceful, Connie?
Yeah.
So negotiation, early on in my career, was just selling somebody something and getting them to buy what it was I had. And so that was my negotiation, was convincing them, hey, this is something you need to have. And so IBM just had I told you earlier, the best training ever. So when I moved over to commercial real estate and was tossed into the pond, I would occasionally go to Don Childress and just kind of say, hey, do you want to come sit in with me, or do you want to do this, or we've got something that we're working on. And he would always kind of give me a couple of little tidbits because he really had never done that much. I mean, think of a guy that's a big, giant developer. He's not really negotiating much, right? But he gave me a couple of pointers, and I'll send you one. And he said, when you're negotiating, don't ever give in to something, say yes to something without getting something back. And that sounds like, well, duh. Yeah, but I mean, when you're in the middle of that and you want to get the deal done, you're like, yes, sure, whatever. When in reality, you need to take a breath. You need to make sure, because you're doing this negotiation on behalf of somebody. And so you need to make sure that you're doing something that works. So my negotiation style has always been win-win. If I've got somebody and I'm trying to, do something that they don't want and I talk them into it, that's not a win-win situation. That's a win-lose situation, and you'll just never be asked again. That you might get over the hump that point, but not again. And so I really always was a win-win negotiator, and even when I had a landlord, and I think things are a little different these days with all these institutions that are owning all these big office buildings. I mean, I just would tell the folks that I was dealing with, hey, this is what's going to get this deal done. You want it or not? And generally speaking, they always said, yeah, let's do it, get it done. And so I'm grateful for that period in my life and I did do a little bit on behalf of Piedmont a while ago, and it was definitely different. I mean, I learned you had to start asking for more, in order to get what you wanted. And so anyway, that was good. The other book that I had that I liked way back when was called Getting to Yes. And that's a great book. So anyway, pass
Never
on.
Split the Difference.
Pardon?
Another book, Never Split the Difference.
There you go.
I will tell you the other thing that I would add is be thoughtful in your negotiations and what you're asking for. It's not just, well, my client wants this. I mean, be logical with the person you're negotiating with and say, well, because of this, this, and this, I do believe that this would be fair if we got this. And to your point, and I'm willing to give here. But have a conversation, and the other rule that I have is I'll trade paper twice before I pick up the phone. Because we're either close after the second one, if it's not like a huge, huge deal, we're either close after the second one or we're really, really far away. But either way, we need to get on the phone and we need to figure out how we're going to have a meeting of the minds to get this done. And I need to kind of hear in the voice on the other side, is this something you really want to get done? Are you negotiating with a couple other people trying to see? And I can kind of pick that up. So, and it's just, to me, email, text message, it's nice, but it is not the best form of communication.
Face-to-face.
Those face-to-face conversations, the phone calls, video can still be face-to-face. You get the body language, you can smile, and people are more receptive. There's just so many other things that happen. You can hear the smile over the phone. There's so many other things that can happen, and it's so much more productive when you're talking to someone. Good.
Audra, one other thing that I think is so important is just listening really well to what the client says, because if you know early on and you ask enough questions what's most important to them, then you can do trades all around the edges in other areas if they feel like they're getting what's most important, if both sides feel like they're getting what's most important to them. So if you keep that, always keep that focus, but to keep that focus, you have to know that information. And sometimes it's asking the broker that's representing the tenant, in my case, or asking the tenant, just really being clear on their chief objectives.
And I don't know, it's not just coming out of my brain, but I've read that women are just really good listeners, which might make us what we are. It's just what I heard on the street and what I've read, so.
Let me add, can I add one thing about the listening? Totally agree on the listening. If you go into a meeting, you and somebody else, or you and 3 other people, which happens a lot, and you're the first one that starts talking, you lose. Don't do that. Ask questions. Get them to speak first. You can't believe what they might tell you when you ask them, and you learn something that might make that whole meeting go differently. And a story, I had a phone call from a rather well-known architect about a month ago. Built a lot of buildings here in Atlanta, big deal. And he called me up and he said, listen, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. I'm like, okay, And no, we set up the meeting. We had a Zoom call. He's got 2 of his most important people on this call. He starts talking. He talked for 45 minutes. I cannot make this up. He talked for 45 minutes, and I thought, it was on a Zoom call, so I thought, well, I can't turn off the camera and start doing something else. And so at the end of the 45 minutes, I said to him, you know, that's great. Great to hear that you're doing new stuff. I'm happy about that. But I'm not doing office stuff at all anymore. I mean, I do tenant rep stuff, but I'm not doing office building leasing anymore. And here's what I'm doing. And I told him, and they hung up, and I thought, the 2 people that were on that call with him just thought, I can't believe I just wasted 45 minutes of my time with this woman. And it was his fault. I mean, it was his fault that he didn't stop to say, hey, by the way, Connie, what's new with you? What a concept. So anyway, ask first. Ask the questions first.
Well, one of the important tenets of negotiation is this. There are things that people might be skeptical about or misunderstand, and those are easy to figure out if you ask good questions and are a good listener. But there's some things you simply cannot do and will not do. So what you have to do is find out where in the priority order of all of the bucket of things that they want, where does that one thing you cannot do fall? If it's the top one, it's probably a deal breaker. If it's in the top 3, it could be a deal breaker. But you don't know. It's great to get people to prioritize their needs. And the only way you can get them to prioritize their needs is for you to simply ask them to do that for you. You can't assume. You just simply ask them, rank them for me. And then when you get to, and oh my, this rental rate of $48.50, and you can't negotiate on that, but it's really number 6 on the list, then you go, well, we can give you this amenity and this parking and this location, and remind them of all the things you can give them, and say, so doesn't that kind of outweigh this one thing that we cannot do? So you've got to ask, what are the priority order of things you're negotiating?
I love that. We've got about 5 minutes before our next break, so we're in between the wine and beer. So I do want you all to take a minute or so to talk about just a challenge that you faced and how you overcame that challenge. in your career? Or not? They're so wonderful, they've had none. I could tell you 100. I know.
Well, I'll tell you one. Diversity in commercial real estate is not a new thing. We were talking about diversity back in the 80s and then in the 90s, and this is back in the 90s, late 90s. One of the big companies in town pursued me to co-manage the Atlanta office. And I thought, well, this is a great career move. So I took the job. And it was a model that had not been used in this organization, but it worked really well in Atlanta. And so other MDs across the country were looking at this going, we kind of like that, because this solved a lot of issues. But corporate said, yeah, no, we're just not going to do this. So they recruited me for this job, and a year, maybe 2 years later, they said, just kidding. You can't have this job anymore. We're just not going to do this anymore. I said, seriously? You heard me. They said, well, it's just not a model that is working for us, and so you're going to have to find something else to do in the company. Well, that was not a good day. Remember that day? That was not a good day. And so I was furious. This whole diversity thing, just don't even get me started on it. It was just maddening to me. And but there was an MD job available in another city, and I thought, well, what the heck? So they were interviewing 2 internal candidates, of which I was one, and 2 external candidates. And I was so mad about this situation that I thought, I'll be darned. I'm going to get this job. So I went about the business of understanding exactly what was going on in this other city. I knew the financials upside and down. I knew the brokers upside and down. I rehearsed a presentation to this hiring council that they had that just left them laying in the floor, and I got the job. And revenge is really a great thing. But the point of that is when you're dealt a bad hand, you got to figure out, are you just going to take it on the chin, or are you going to figure out a way to make something positive out of it? And it ultimately ended up being a good career move for me that led to other things. But boy, at the time, it sure didn't feel good.
And I would tag on to that there are times when you need to double down and come out swinging and figure it out. There was a time when a big corporation asked me to help them get rid of a couple of floors of space. I found a tenant immediately for it, and we had come to terms, and we were about to document the lease, when the company who leased the space and was subleasing it decided, oops, we've got a group of people we need to put there. So it's like the deal's off. We've got to backfill it with our own people. And this was like a 2-floor deal. Not, as Shar says, not a happy day. But I had a decision to make. You know, I think under Georgia law, I'd found a tenant who was ready, willing, and able to transact. And we had had a meeting of terms, and we had even gotten, a letter of intent negotiated. Not that that's binding in any way. But, I could have made a big stink with that company, but I didn't. I said, just remember, when you needed somebody to backfill your space right away, that I did that for you. And later, this was IBM, later when they were vacating 26 floors, and they came back to interview me on my own when I was an apprentice, along with CBRE, all the big firms came in and did pitches. And at the end, the IBM rep walked over. The guy's name who had originally I'd worked with, his name was Marty, and it was Trex who I was working for then. who was interviewing me then. And he walked over, and we were standing by the window looking down on the street, and he goes, "Where are you going to stand with your sandwich board?" And I go, "What?" He goes, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Well, if I give you the leasing assignment, you're going to get out on the street with a sandwich board, right?" And it was a joke, obviously. But he said, "No, Marty told me what happened. And he told me that you got the tenant and that you really kind of got dealt a bad blow. And you performed for us once before, so we want to give you this opportunity." So by not making a big stink, I wound up getting a much, much bigger opportunity, 26-fold opportunity, so. It can work both ways, I guess. You have to gauge it in the moment, right?
Right, absolutely. Anything you want to add, Connie?
No, and only because I was pretty blessed to be a part of one property. I mean, y'all think about this.
Yeah.
Nobody lives a career at one property. And so while there were some challenges along the way with some of the owners that were more difficult to work with than others, that was just a gigantic blessing. And so I guess the biggest challenge was suddenly realizing I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I had always said, I don't know how I'm going to leave here because I have so much invested, and it's not my identity because I do not care. But you could kind of see that might be a part of it. And so I think the day that decision was made for me by Piedmont, not by me, not by Childress Klein, I always looked at it and I said, you know what? God closed a window. He has opened a door for me. And usually you hear it the other way around. And for me, that was a good thing. So I guess it was a challenge because I was suddenly being faced with something that I had never been faced with before.
I love it. I just think it's fascinating that you've been with the same firm. I mean, it's amazing, and it's cool as I don't know what, because that whole transition thing is a thing. So it is break time.
Okay, so Dallas just asked me about the RJR Nabisco deal, which was, it was the deal. It was 300 Galleria, and they leased the top half of the building, and that was pretty fun. And then about 12, 15 months later, they came back and they tried to do the leverage buyout, and suddenly it was like, oh, no, that isn't going to happen. But they had moved in, they took half the building, and Louis Gerstner had become the CEO of RJR Nabisco. And so he told everybody, they had moved from Winston-Salem to Atlanta. That was with Ross Johnson, if you remember that name. And then Louis Gerstner got involved, and he said, you know what, just sell that building. They didn't own it. Right. And so that was kind of, we took off from there. And that. It was a record build out at that time. Unheard of in the town. It was like $200 a foot, yeah. And they had carpet that was 100-ounce carpet, which I haven't seen. I don't know. Does anybody do 100-ounce wool carpet anymore? Certainly not in an office building. They do these little teeny thin, so anyway. It was. Oh, yeah. Okay, now, do you want to hear a good story about that? Yeah. So our property management would do lunch and learns, a lot. And so it was time they were going to do a how to quit smoking. How to quit smoking, so they had put this stand down in the lobby, and it said, how to quit smoking seminar today at noon. And Tad Leithhead, who many of you probably knew, walked in, saw that, picked it up at that moment, got on the elevator with the stand, took it to the property management office and said, what are you thinking? These guys that's what they do for a living. Anyway, that was great. Yeah, right, exactly.
So, I'm sorry, sir. We're not at questions yet. I know you're the president, but we're not at questions yet, okay? This would be, I'm the moderator. Woo! Now, Now, y'all have an idea of what I deal with every day. Okay, I'm gonna let you go first, but yes, we're gonna kind of ease back into this. We're not there yet. Ooh, okay. He is. You guys click some stuff when he loves memory lane. So anyway, I wanted to just mention a couple of things that I also think are really good, important for careers. One of them being board service, if that is important to you, whether it be nonprofit boards or whether it would be corporate boards. My first introduction to Connie, and my only introduction to Connie, was I had taken a course I joined an organization called On Board. I had an interest in being a board director. And Connie did some interviewing for On Board after I went through my accelerator program. And since have been able to and have been blessed with joining a corporate board, and they are paid boards, these independent directors. And Connie, I just wanted you to speak a few minutes about how that works, how you got on board. If you're like me, this just was a couple years ago. I had never even given it a thought, and it has been the best experience of my life. So I did want to share that today.
I love that, and thank you for asking that question. So, came through IBM, very corporate, obviously. Went to the commercial real estate business, very entrepreneurial. But I have always done, like CRE and, the not-for-profit and that kind of thing, CRE and NAIOP and lots of other things. And I ended up being asked to be on the Kennesaw State University Foundation Board. And so first of all, I had no idea what that meant. I had to ask. They told me what it was. I said, well, I think that would be fun. I'd like to do that. I got involved with KSU. I ended up becoming the chairman of the foundation, which was so much fun. I loved it. But what I really kind of liked about it was I kind of liked managing the crowd, and you're sitting in a boardroom and, everybody wants to talk. You got a lot of type A personalities, generally speaking. So I liked that. I decided I would like to serve. Plus I was paying attention to other people that were doing it, making money at it. And so I thought, well, I'd like to do that. So there's a director's college with UGA, great program. I don't know if they still do it, but I did that for 2 or 3 years in a row. And they taught me all about duty of care, duty of loyalty, all these things that you need to understand if you're going to be on a corporate board, because that is what you're responsible for. So I took those classes, and then I started telling everybody that I knew that had some sort of a corporate background that was something I wanted to do. And so I just put together this big list of people that were mentoring me, kind of, and I would just, about every 6 months, I would follow back up, go have a cup of coffee with everybody. And finally, one day, one of the former chairmen of the KSU Foundation called me up out of the blue, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you. Our bank, which at that time was Brand Bank, which you might be familiar with. Brand Bank, we're going to finally add some women to the board. It's like, you think it's about time?
What a concept.
Yeah, right, that's right. And so I went down and I interviewed for the board, and it was so much fun, and it was exactly what I liked. And honestly, I did not have a great background for this, because I didn't have a financial background. That's what they're looking for. I couldn't serve on the audit committee, even though I ended up becoming the audit chair, which is hilarious. And so it ended up being great. Now, unfortunately, about 24 months into that board role, they needed to, some of the private equity partners wanted to get their money out. So we went out to the market and ended up being sold to Renaissance Bank, which is a $18 billion publicly traded bank. And because I sat on the brand board, I got to interview for basically one job that of all of our board could go and sit on the Renaissance Bank board. And I've been doing that since 2018. And I just find it fascinating. I don't know anything about the banking business. I mean, I do now, but I didn't at the time. And I really like it. And so does that answer the question that you?
It does, it
Okay.
does. And again, our intersection, so I'm on a private company board, and there is a difference between
Right.
publicly traded and a private company board, which I kind of recommend everybody start because you really learn a lot. But I think it was Kay who mentioned you never know who's watching you, and you're always interviewing. A guy would have never thought out of DC, he's now the COO for Trammacrow, Adam Weirs. I knew him, was in his same space. I don't even think we ever broke bread together, but a Harvard Business School graduate friend of his was like, you know what? We're looking for a woman of color, and guess what? I tell women and women of color, if they want you because you're a woman or just bust the door down. Some people want to think, oh, well, I don't want to be the token. It's not about being the token, it's about the opportunity, and then prove to them once you get in the room why you should have been in the room to begin with. But he said his HBS friend was like, listen, I'm looking for a board director, and he gave him my name. And I'm still like scratching my head about, we're really good friends now, as you can imagine, but I would have never thought that he saw me in that light, and it is a beautiful thing. And I want everyone to consider it if it's something that you're interested in, because at some point you do retire, and it's something that you can do after your retirement. So thank you for sharing, and that's how Connie and I met. Now, before we get to questions, and you're going first, Dallas, and Robin told me you have to come up to the microphone. Before we go, we touched on it a little bit about associations, but and what CRE specifically, what it has done for your career and what it's done for your friendship. Can you talk about other organizations that you might have been a part of during your career? And then just speak to overall your thought on the importance of board service, nonprofit board service, and serving associations, whether it be ACBR or what have you. Go ahead, Kay.
I've served on several boards. I served on Buckhead Christian Ministries Board and helped start a housing program back several years ago. When I was leasing in Midtown, I served on Midtown Alliance Board. The board that I served on for 16 years kind of came about because I was leasing 3 Ravinia, and I served on the Perimeter Community Improvement District Board. That was a fantastic board to be on because we had money to spend. 3 Ravinia being one of the larger properties in that submarket, all the owners agree to tax themselves. I don't know how much you all know about community improvement districts. I know some of you know a lot, but we taxed ourselves, had this extra bit of funds to spend to really improve the entire market. So, we were involved in doing the first diverging diamond interchange and a lot of things out in that market. We helped get, which I know everybody's tired of now, but all the improvements to 285 and 400 teed up and federal funding for that. So I was on that board for 16 years, and I felt really good about being a part of that. I felt like it was important work. As did I with Buckhead Christian Ministries. I was on the board here at ACBR for many years and was president in 2018. And I will tell you that going back to what we've all said about CRE, I was asked at a very young age in my 20s to be president of CRE because I'd taken a very large part in its formation. And at that time, like Shar was talking, I was terrified of public speaking. I mean, snakes, spiders, and public speaking. It was just like the thing that was the worst. And not to mention that I was like 8 to 9 months pregnant. But I decided I needed to do it for that reason. It forced me. You're never going to get better at anything unless you force yourself to do it.
Absolutely.
And so forcing myself to be at the podium and conquer those fears, I don't know that I ever would have felt comfortable becoming president of ACBR had I not, it's these things we do over life kind of build on one another. So I would say definitely get involved with organizations, definitely find out where your passion, your own personal passion lies. Because then, like Connie was saying, it's a joy to do it. It's not just another thing on your calendar, but it's something that means something to you. And if you're not a member of organizations like ACBR, I highly recommend it.
And not just be a member.
How's that for a plug, Dallas?
Well, I'm about to drop a little more, not just be a member, but get involved.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
know
more important.
I've been blessed to be a part of the board this year through Empire. And I mean, the things that ACBR is accomplishing and has accomplished is extraordinary. And this is for our business specifically. So don't just join, but get involved. You're only going to get out of an organization what you put into it.
That's absolutely true. So you need to sign up for a committee.
Yes.
Work up to being a chair of a committee, work up to being on the board, and then you really do make really wonderful, lasting relationships from those experiences. I mean, the 16 years that I spent on the PCID board, just like Connie, talking about one of her fellow board members was the reason she got on this bank board, or learned of the opportunity. She got on the bank board because of her expertise, but she learned of the opportunity. And when I went to JLL, one of the PCID other board members who had seen how I worked over all those years, really knew what I was about, immediately came to me and said, we'd like to hire you to do this portfolio of properties. So when I went to JLL, I could bring all this work in with me, which was really important. So it matters. It's, again, you're interviewing wherever you go.
Sure.
You're right. Going to monthly lunches, just don't even bother. If you're going to join, first of all, this is your industry. It is giving you a livelihood. It is your responsibility to give back. And you give back by joining these organizations that you have an interest in or that are part of your area of expertise. But join them with the mission of becoming an officer. You will develop relationships at a subcommittee level that will get you business, it will get you jobs, it will teach you how to do all kinds of business things like create a strategic plan, manage a budget, manage people without having authority to manage them. I mean, you learn all of these great skills in a very safe environment, and it helps build your reputation. That's Shar, she shows up, she's always prepared. And then they tell Audra, well, if you got this opening, you should ask Shar, because she just get things done. And so you want to be that person. You want to be the K on the CID who has invested and gets things done. It's little ways to build your reputation capital.
I love it. I love it. Dallas, you're up. We're going to open. Robin said you have to come. I wasn't playing. Robin, oh, wait a minute. She's going to let you sit there. Okay. Thank you. Because when Robin
There
tells
we go.
me, I listen.
There we go. All right. So this question is really for Kay and Connie. So can you talk a little bit about the good, bad, and the ugly of dealing with tenant reps? And feel free to name names.
Well, I remember this time I worked with Dallas, and no, I'm playing.
Oh, boy.
Your name. So John Dowling. Did any of you ever work with John Dowling?
Is he outing people? What are we doing?
He passed, so you can talk. You can say what you want to. Oh, I'm sorry, but he was the best of the best. Andy Gertner's mentor. So I was just curious to hear.
I did not know
Should
him.
I?
No, you go ahead, because I do not know that man.
From time to time with some of the bigger law firm deals that I've done.
Turn your mic on. Thank you. Since I have my mic.
From time to time with some of the bigger law firms I did, specifically, down in Midtown and also out on the perimeter, you'd have brokers come in from other cities. And the New York brokers are just a different breed. I don't know that I need to say more than that. What I would tell you is, I've negotiated deals with John Schlesinger, with Andy Gertner, with a lot of some of the top brokers that have been around a long time. And some of their tactics and approaches I appreciate more than others. But I would tell you that I never fault them for trying to get the very best deal for their client, because in some of these deals, there's millions of dollars at stake. And it's no joke, you know, this is a big line on the corporate budget. And so if people are above board and they're tough negotiators, I don't really fault them for that. I do. There have been occasions, and I won't really name names, but probably most of the names wouldn't mean anything to you, because most often there's somebody from another city that comes in because there's some connection. But if there's underhanded means or deceptive means or things that just not good business practice, and certainly not what I want to be known for, those are the things I have most objection to. I like it most when a broker will be honest with me and tell me, and as transparent as possible, to tell me what their client needs. Let me go about trying to fulfill that need for you. And, you know, I just feel like, Connie, a win-win is the best outcome, where the majority of what the tenant wants and the majority of what the landlord needs. And I have even said to brokers, do you understand why this is important to the landlord? And I've had experienced brokers. I remember having a conversation with Randy Merrill, if some of you remember Randy, and he's a lawyer and a broker and really just brilliant. But I said, you know why this is important to the landlord? Why we're stuck on this issue? And I would go into detail about what this means to them with their investors or whatever, and how important it is. And he goes, I never thought of it like that. So sometimes when you're stuck on an issue, really don't just butt up against it. Have a dialogue about it. Find out what the workaround is, you know? That's my best advice.
Very good stuff. Who's next?
Questions. No, I don't believe.
Okay, it seems like, okay, here we go.
Okay, nobody wanted to be first, so.
I got you.
Hello, I'm Allie. How are y'all doing?
Hi,
Allie.
So something I've kind of been curious about, I started in real estate commercially about 3 years ago. And do you think there's a benefit to forming an LLC or a corporation, which I'm paid through from my brokerage? Is there any benefit to that versus being paid directly? Does that make sense? Because I know some people.
I would strongly encourage you to talk to an accountant, but I have one, and I would leave it like that. But if you guys want to dive in.
I will just say, tagging on to what I said earlier about there's a time when I needed to start my own company because I was about to get fired by IBM. I formed my company then, and what I would suggest to any of you who just have your salesperson's license, go ahead and get your broker's license. And go ahead and, you know, you could either go ahead and incorporate a small company, or you can wait to do that later. But what that gives you is the flexibility that if you're ever, like has happened to Shar, has happened to me, has happened to everybody but Connie apparently, that you find yourself between jobs, that you have a place to hang your shingle and do some deals and keep some income coming in. So just while you're in the flow of doing a salesperson's license, just keep right on going and do your broker's license, would be my best advice.
Great advice. Great advice.
Great question. All right. I knew I wear sneakers for a reason.
Shar referred to AI before, and I'm really curious. I mean, we've talked a lot about how things have changed since when I was with you all during those 40 years.
Right.
And I can't imagine the changes that are coming. Have you some insight into?
Well, you know, I'm not smart enough to be able to forecast that. But when you look at the capabilities of what AI can do just in writing a prospect letter, you know, you just dictate into it. write me a marketing letter to a law firm for blah, blah, blah. And it comes back, it just blows your mind what it comes back. And Kay and I are good writers. I was an old journalism major. I thought I was a great writer. I thought I was a great writer. And I spent a lot of time with brokers, hours coming up with the right wording, blah, blah, blah. Boom, done. So if it can do that, think about it on the client's side. They already think that they're the smartest people on the planet because they can Google office space or industrial space, and well, why do I need you? And I'm paying you for what? Well, think about what AI is going to do to that. It's going to disintermediate all of this. So we as an industry have to figure out how to be relevant. And relevance starts with relationships. That's never going to change. But again, you have to be able to take this data that is ubiquitous and interpret it in a way that's meaningful for your prospects and clients. And that's why when I said earlier about you've got to become really business men and women, not real estate men and women. So you have to figure out how to stay relevant. And honestly, I don't know how to tell you to do that. All this is really new. I just know it's out there, it's not going away, and we're going to hit the wall and there will be no skid marks.
I will say, I think I read an article maybe 2 months ago, and it might have been the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, where the data in these chat GPT AI platforms are still like 2 years behind. So it's not, the data is not current. And I try to tell my young folks that are loving this stuff, understand that. Now, when it comes to writing and the skill in writing, I thought I was a good writer too until I started using it. So I would just be mindful of that if you're using it for data.
There's one point I'd like to make on that, and I actually heard a young woman say that she was representing a tenant, and she had taken them to Regis, and guess what? I had to do nothing. I didn't have to do anything. They just took over my deal, they made the deal, and mailed me a check. Well, if you take that attitude to your business, you can be so easily replaced. I was absolutely cringing as she said this, because I thought, you're adding no value. Did you look over the lease to see if it was market, to see if they should sign it? That's your job as a broker. So I would just say there is the relationship piece that has to be played up much more than young people think it needs to be played up, because they're so reliant on Googling everything or on AI or on whatever platform.
There was a survey, excuse me for interrupting, there was a survey done a few years ago of 3,000 executives across all industries, and when asked about interfacing with salespeople, what they learned from this survey is that these executives who are decision makers were 2/3 of the way through the buying process before they even engaged a salesperson. And when they engaged a salesperson, I forget, it was 10% or less, ever invited them back for a second meeting. And when asked why, they said because they never added any value beyond what I thought I could do myself on the internet.
Well, and the other thing is, if you put a tenant, that young woman who was speaking, who took the tenant to Regis, what does she think her chances are when that tenant renews of them calling her to represent them? She turned her client over completely. You know what? That's just not smart. So when you're talking, and when Dallas asked me about brokers, that's why I'm telling you, I respect a broker who's trying to get the deal, a good deal.
They gotta show up.
Yeah,
show up.
Show up.
I will tell you, this is a little off topic, but I do not use the self-checkout in the grocery store. I want to talk to someone. I want to say hello. How are you? Oh, I think that might have rung up wrong. I don't. I mean, and I want these people to have jobs. I want them to have jobs. So I'm a little old-fashioned, but good for you.
It's the same thing with what you said earlier about going to the office too, right?
Absolutely.
It's as important to connect with your clients as it is to connect with the people in your office.
That's right.
The young people have
Right.
really, they don't realize it, but they haven't been getting mentorship and training in the workplace because they're not going into the office.
Right.
I just think that's such a, and they don't know what, they're not creating these friendships and these building the camaraderie because they're not plugged in.
When I first got in the business, I saw no value in going to broker events. I'm not getting any business there. I'm going to events where I can get business. Wrong answer. And I learned the hard way. And so don't anybody else make that mistake. Those relationships, when I'm trying to get the deal done, to be able to say, pick up the phone and say, Kay, now you know me. We know each other. What do you need? What do I need? Is just everything. Go ahead, Chris.
It is.
So incredible information that you guys shared with us, and I hope especially the young people took a lot of notes today. So this business can get stressful from time to time. What is your happy place? Where do you go to relax, or what's your outlet?
I play golf. That's what Dilsey and I do. We play golf.
20 years ago, we bought a lake house out on a point on a lake in the mountains of North Georgia. And during that phase, probably about every other weekend, I would leave on Friday, and the further north I went, the lower my shoulders went. So that's been sort of my place of sanity. It's quiet, it's peaceful, it's in nature. I am a big proponent of trying to get out in nature, like once a day at least, do a walk, do something to break the glare of fluorescent lights and whatever else, the stress.
Yeah, back in the day, I mean, I was a runner. I was a runner for 25 years, and I loved that. I can't do that anymore.
Totally get that. So mine, I had a young fellow say to me, we were talking about financial planning and stuff, and he said, so what are your hobbies? I said, oh, wait, hobbies? I don't know. And I do play golf, not as much as Shar and Steve, but I like that. But today my happy place is my 3 little grandkids that live, 15 minutes away. And it just is the best thing ever. It's worth everything that you went through, with your kids to get these grandkids. They are just a blessing.
I posted on social media a little interaction with my granddaughter because I'm so with you.
You have a granddaughter?
Oh, I do, and she's 8, and it was the sweetest message. She asked me something about if I were a color, what would it be? And I said red because you're bold and beautiful and brilliant, and we just went on, and it was so wonderful. I posted on social media, but I would tell you outside of her because she's in Columbus, Ohio, it would all day be golf and the ocean. Can't get close enough to it.
Another Dallas question. Oh, no.
No.
Oh, there you go.
That's not her first. I'm coming to you.
Thank you. My name is Shauna, and I'm with Carter Hill. And so the 3 of you mentioned that when you all were coming up that there weren't women mentors. And so on this side of it, if you were your own mentor, what advice would you have given yourself 5 years in your career?
5 years ago?
5 years into
your
5 years
career.
into the career.
Well, so I would say, and I'm sure we all have different things, early on, especially when I moved here to Atlanta, I had a child, was going to have more children, and I basically laid down the law at that point. I know this isn't your question, but it kind of is. And I said, I don't do nights, and I don't do 7 o'clock meetings. And so that, I didn't know at the time how important I think that was going to be to my life, but I'm glad somehow along the way that ended up being kind of a career thing that I did for me. But I think the advice would be, looking back, you know what? Just don't worry about it. It's not that important. On the scale of what's important in life, it's just not. Ecclesiastes, I think, is the book that we studied that just says it's all meaningless. And you need to look into Ecclesiastes if you have any questions about that, because that's what is said in that book. But it really kind of is. I mean, we're here for a short period of time, and so anyway, relax and enjoy what you got.
Those are the words of Solomon.
Yeah, that's right.
So similarly to what Connie is saying, friends, true friends, and, well, starting with faith, family, and true friends. If you don't get that right, the rest doesn't matter.
All right. Hi, ladies. My name is Jill with TDL Smith Company. Thank you everything that you guys shared today. I want to ask a technical question. So what's your secret sauce when you do prospecting? What kind of homework you like to do before you approach the potential client?
I got this one.
Yeah, this is Shar all over the place.
Back in the day, it was a numbers game. The stats in commercial real estate are this. You got to dial the phone 100 times to talk to 10 people. Just dial the phone. You got to talk to 10 people to get an appointment. So do the math. It's staggering. That's why it's so hard to be a tenant rep broker. That's why relationships are so important. Now, we know that this works because we've got successful people in this room who started out that way and they're still here. We know it works. Richard Bauer, oh my golly.
Comes to mind.
Two of those big brick cell phones. Today, it's different. What I recommend to early career, or anyone really doing prospecting, is you have to give to get. The old prospecting call for tenant rep was, Christine, my name is Shar Fortune. I'm with Shar Fortune Real Estate. And Christine, I see you got a lease coming up in 18 months. And Christine, I'd like to come over and have you tell me all about your lease and your space and what you're looking for and all that, so I can make a commission and make some money. I mean, that's essentially what you were saying, right? Dale? Pretty much. So today it's different. Prospects are very smart about this. The best thing you can do is study your prospect base and understand what business issues they are facing that you can research and become an expert at, to give them a gift of information to meet with you. Now, this business issue has to connect the dots with commercial real estate, but that's easy to do. And there are topics that are so simple, like labor demographics. Every company you deal with hires people. And every company you deal with is in a certain location. So if you're in Buckhead, what are the demographics of the labor force in Buckhead? What's changing? What's the forecast? What's crime doing to the area? I mean, you can build a whole story around that and call up your clients and get an appointment. So back when the Braves moved to Cobb County, we got more appointments in the Northwest submarket calling tenants out there about the Braves than we did real estate any day of the week. And you're going, what? So here's what the call sounded like. It was this, Ms. Younglove, Shar Fortune Real Estate. You've probably seen the headlines about the Braves moving to Cobb County. My clients out there are worried sick about what's going to happen to traffic at 5 o'clock on game day. But we've researched that. We've talked to the DOT. We got all kinds of stuff that would really be instructive to you and your employees. It'd only take me 20 minutes to run you through that. How about I come by a week after next at 2 o'clock? Oh, sure, come on by. I got to tell you, we had so many appointments using that. And it's the same thing with other business issues. You know, Dallas, you've probably seen that the labor demographics in Midtown are outrageous. There is such high competition for talent that companies, they can't pay enough. Well, we've researched that. We know why that's happening. We know what the trends are going to be. Let me run by and walk you through that, and I can help you find a location where you can hire the talent you need to run your business. And that's how you connect the dots with commercial real estate.
Who's going to turn that down? Yeah. Nobody. Trust me, I know. I was at the Galleria, and everybody was calling on all of my tenants about moving out of the, oh, it's going to be horrible over here. But it was good. It was great.
Yeah. So gifts of information. There are books out there called, what is it? Givers take, givers get more. I don't know. Givers sell more. I can't remember. There's a name of the book. I'll look it up and tell you. But you've got to give to get. And so what this means is you got to work a little harder. If you want to do the numbers game and dial it 100 times, have at it. But if you want to work smarter, then you pick 3 business issues that your clients are dealing with. You get smart about it, and then you call them up and you give that gift of information. And they're going to say to you, Jew, well, why don't you just email me that? Well, Jew, I'm sure you can appreciate this. This is my proprietary research on which I build my business. And for now, I'm just sharing it in person. I'm sure you can appreciate that. And you do not email it, because that's the blow-off. You're calling to get the appointment.
This is awesome. Any other questions? Kent?
All right. About discipline. So can you guys share daily, weekly, monthly, annual practices that you felt contributed to your success in your careers? And then the second part of the question is something that you didn't do that contributed to your success.
That we didn't do that contributed.
Didn't do that contributed. Ooh.
So you talked about discipline. Can I throw something out there? Sure. One of the things, this is a great story, and has to do with my dad. And so I was working for IBM, and all I did was drive around and haul 35-pound typewriters. No joke. 35 to place to place to place to place to place. And it was tiring. And after a while, I called him up one day and I said, I'm just tired. I don't know, what should I do next? Because I was supposed to work, right? I couldn't just not do it. That was not what we were supposed to do. We didn't have to turn in call reports, thank you, goodness. But he said, you know what? On those days where you feel like you just you're not at your best, and you just don't particularly want to do it, go call on your friends. Go call on somebody that you did business with. And it's your way of getting back to the relationship and to the network. And then you go home at night and you don't feel bad because you didn't do anything. You feel, usually you have a good time, and it was the best piece of advice ever. So anyway, that's mine.
You might get some business from those friends.
Exactly, that's right.
So, like Atlanta, I went to DC in 2010 because obvious reasons, the market here was horrible. I'd just gotten into the business, and I didn't know a soul when I got there. A couple of things that I learned that I did. I had to go to networking events, and I would walk in there, and there'd be 200 or 300 people, and I didn't know a soul. So I convinced myself that I was walking into a room of friends I just had not met yet. Now, you guys might think it's a little crazy, but it worked. Psychologically, I put the positive spin on it. And I wasn't leaving there without 5 cards, not 20, 5 cards. And it didn't mean 5 prospects. It meant 5 cards of people that I could call on. I started with dinner. That got expensive. Went to breakfast and coffee. So that's one thing. And not only that, I went to LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce events. I mean, I went places that I wouldn't have normally gone to just meet people. I didn't put anybody in a box. So I strongly suggest that if you want to be in this business, it is a people business. Get very comfortable with people, learn how to listen and learn about people, learn how to follow up with them. And it's not like getting 5,000 contacts, it's about getting real meaningful contacts. As far as something that I didn't do, I never worked on a team. And that is something that I had a brief moment, but it was really brief. I really wish that and I recommend everyone that's getting in this business, if you can, try to join a team. I don't care at what level you come in on that team. You have to learn from some people, and you need that support. So that's one thing that I wish that I would have done. And like I said earlier, I wish I would have been more intentional about meeting people in the industry and building those relationships, because I was halfway through my career when I figured out how important they were: architects, designers, contractors, other brokers, period.
Well, everybody, please join me in saluting these women to say thank you. This is, the Visionary Series was birthed out of what we call the Wisdom Circle. And as you can see, we have a plethora of wisdom in front of us today. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Atlanta Commercial Board, and just thank you again. Salute.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate you.